have a feed of my class, and you'll see some of my other kids down there.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing a few of them scrolling along. Somebody's eating something. Are you allowed to eat in class?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, right. Who cares?
Okay.
Oh, wait. Here, I see now kind of a whole bunch of you. Hey, gang, how's it going?
They're learning.
Right?
They've never used Google Hangouts either.
Oh, good. Well, that makes me feel better then. That's good.
And it looked completely different last time I used it. So don't feel bad.
Well, that's all right. This is kind of fun to learn how to use this.
Yeah.
It could be handy for other things.
Guys, it is a school. Okay, so Janelle and I know one another at least 20 years.
I would say at least. I've been out of high school over 20 years now.
Yeah, well, I've been 15. At least 20.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, you and I met through, I suppose, through your sister.
Ruth.
And she and I met when you guys moved up to the ridge there in Freeburg.
Well, we didn't move there, but everybody thought we did. We've been there since.
Or when you guys, I guess when you guys started coming to the Free Church, maybe when we thought.
Okay, Janelle and my sister were both involved in this conservation group through the University of Minnesota, where they tried to save pheasants.
Quail.
Quail.
Yeah, it was quail, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Thurman Tucker and his quail.
Yep. And Janelle went to school for English degree, right?
I'm a school dropout, if I have to admit that right away. But I would have graduated. I was like 4 semesters short of graduating. I would have had a major in English, emphasis in creative writing, and a minor in psychology. But you don't do really much with any of that stuff by itself.
And then she went into radio, and she's here to talk to you about that choice and what she does there. So
yep,
take it away. Tell them whatever you want.
So
they are supposed to be your captive audience.
Perfect. Okay, so that sounds awful. Are you guys on a ship?
No.
I'm in radio. So this is my fancy office here. Can you guys see behind me a little bit? We actually have one of the nicest spots in downtown Decorah. It's just extreme northeastern Iowa. I've been here for, it'll be 16 years this fall. I kind of fell into the job, fall into the job, but have been doing on air and what we call in radio traffic for all of that time. In other ways, I've kind of changed things. Like, for example, last year, I also became our news director for all 3 of our radio stations, which is also a whole kind of other thing along with that. Traffic means, I'm going to set this down because I talk with my hands and I'm going to make you guys all seasick. Traffic means I enter all the orders for all 3 of our radio stations. So when a sales rep goes out on the street and says to Casey's General Stores, for example, you guys have Casey's out in Tyler, right? What?
She can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, so somebody goes to a client like that and says, listen, we want to sell you radio advertising. And so then that sales rep turns in an order to me and I put the order into our traffic system, which then logs it. So if you listen to the radio, you hear songs, radio advertisements, maybe a weather announcement, these kind of things. All of that stuff is in what's called a log. And so then my traffic log, which is all the commercial announcements, is eventually merged with a music log, which my program director takes care of. And it all jives to become what you hear on the radio. About 6:30 in the morning, and I work a straight 8. I see that was one of the things that you guys had on your questions, hours. I leaned in a little bit on that a few years back, and because I'm on salary, and I was working a 9-hour day technically because you're supposed to take an 8-hour lunch break, and it didn't always happen. And so I said to my bosses, here's what I'd really like to do. And so I work a straight 8 now, and I don't leave during the day. I'm mean, I can sneak out for like 5 minutes to go across the street and get an ice cream cone or something, and you're not going to get whipped with sticks. But so it's kind of cool. I work from 7 to 3. I come in a little earlier than normal just because I like to have my ducks in a row. But and I put together a newscast then for all 3 of our radio stations, and I enter orders, and then I am sidekick with the morning show guy here, Les, his name is. So we have the morning show, the Les and Nell in the morning show. And then I'm on the air myself from 9 to noon. And then now I'm in my office to try to get through all of this fun paperwork and get my logs done so I can get out of here and go to steam engine days. So that's kind of I don't know, what I do every day. I work Monday through Friday, but then when we do things like live broadcasts, which I actually just did last night, you go out to a location and you use your fancy little phone, and I can call into the station and override what we have on the air. Or if we have a live jock in the studio, you talk with the live jock or whatever and say, hey, we're here at B Mobile, for example, is where I was last night. And this is what they have on special for phones. And we were doing registrations for our big giveaway and some of that kind of stuff. So that you can make a little extra money doing that because you get paid what's called a talent fee. So hopefully our listeners actually think I'm talented. But my bosses do well enough so that they pay me that talent fee when I go out and do that kind of thing. Let's see. How many hours do I work? I work regular old 40-hour week. I like that, except for these above and beyond things. Benny's, I actually work for a very nice small company. So I get part of my healthcare is covered, which is kind of a mess, but that's a political conversation we won't get into. Retirement account, but my bosses also do a contribution thing too. So there's, some really nice benefits to that. It's a 401k, then they match to that. And then we also do a profit share. So at the end of the year, when they look back and see what the company's made for profits, then they kind of split that all up amongst the employees. And we don't get a cash thing right now, but it goes into my retirement account.
What about benefits? What about benefits?
Sorry, you echoed out there first.
Oh, sorry, Janelle. What about benefits meeting people you wouldn't normally meet, or
okay? So you meet a ton of really interesting people. This is where the news thing has become really fun for me. I've gotten to know a lot of law enforcement in our surrounding county because our 3 stations cover extreme northeast Iowa, extreme southeastern Minnesota, and extreme west central Wisconsin. And so between 3 states, you get to know, because our news sometimes, it's small town. You guys are Tyler. Tyler's not huge either. And, for the most part, we don't have a lot of murders and what you would typically think of as news. And so a lot of times my news stories are meetings that are upcoming. Like, for example, today I have a story about a meeting in Lansing about replacing Big Bridge. So in doing that, though, I've gotten to know Craig White down in Lansing, who happens to be the director of their Chamber of Commerce, that kind of thing. Same deal with the law enforcement. When you cover accidents or when you do that kind of thing, most of my news I do right here in my studio or in my office from this phone. I don't have to really go anywhere and be out on location, although I do some of that too. Does that kind of answer that question a little bit? And if you want to talk about listeners, that's a whole other thing, because everywhere you go, it's, we listen here, we listen there. And, the kind of fun part about what we do is we're a small community. I'm pretty sure Decorah is 10,000, and that's with the Luther students. We have a small 4-year community or 4-year liberal arts college in Decorah. And so when the students are here, I think we consider it a 10,000 town. Otherwise, it's like 7,000. So it's not huge. But when things go wrong, last year, right at this time, actually, there was a lot of flooding that went through. And so this is the kind of thing where we then can take our platform and let people know how to stay safe when they're being flooded or what they should be doing. This is what law enforcement wants you to be doing now. Do you need to evacuate? Do you need to do? And so the small town local radio, I think, still is a very viable and important part of our smaller communities.
Give me a second. Okay.
Yeah.
do you have any specific questions you've thought of for Janelle, or questions from your list that you've thought of? Yes? No? You wanted to talk to someone in radio. Here's your someone in radio. To make that happen, if you wanted to ask a question, right now, if you look, there's little microphones with a dash through it that shows that you're.
Oh, sure.
Yep. At the top of your screen, you would click. See how that works? That way you only hear from so many people at one time and you don't have all the audio going at once. See, we're learning skills. She just muted herself.
Okay, I figured I muted myself.
Learning a little bit at a time here.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
What about written communication? Because you do a lot, obviously, verbally on air, but what about for advertising things or campaigns or setting up interviews with people?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the email, and partly because email leaves you a nice paper trail of things, electronic paper trail, so you're not killing trees, you know. But I like the email thing just almost exclusively how I communicate with my sales reps. They send me orders and the copy or ads or whatever that we're running for our clients. But I also like communicating with clients that way, because a lot of times, at least for me, and I feel like because I have a pretty decent grasp of writing, this is why writing is important, which I'm pretty darn sure Ms. Lampert is trying to teach you guys that too. I work with grown adults that don't know how to put together a sentence, subject, predicate, noun, verb, to make sense. And it can make your communication in the long run. So some of this stuff when you're writing essays and it sounds kind of stupid. And I mean, I liked this stuff growing up and I still felt like, man, why are we writing so many essays? I know now that I'm a much more effective communicator than a lot of the people that I work with. And it's not just, I'm not just talking about my coworkers necessarily, but I mean, even clients who, if you aren't able to be clear, whether with your written or your spoken word, it's going to make your life a lot harder, frankly.
Yep. Janelle's mom, Betty, had a unique way of teaching her kids how to find those errors.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? With the...
Yes, my mom used to pay me to find mistakes in the newspaper, and I was a big reader. So yeah, I'm a huge nerd. I know that you guys are all looking at me like, oh, this old lady. But I was a big reader, and so if I found, I think it's the way it went. If I found a grammatical error or a spelling error in a novel, she'd give me a quarter, and if I found one in the newspaper, she'd give me a dime. And I almost ran her broke for one thing, and it's still. All these years later, I have a really hard time reading the newspaper because it's chock full of that stuff. The internet is a disaster. And novels, if I ever find it, I always want to call my mom and be like, hey, I'm an old lady now. You should, pay me $5 for this. Inflation.
I liked it. My mom didn't pay us. What else, guys? This is your opportunity. Get your list of questions out if you need them. They're like, where do we have those? Notebooks, English notebooks, second page. So you mentioned that you dropped out of school. However...
Yeah, I was a college dropout.
We'll forgive you.
Thanks.
But the skills you learned from your mom and from school and from college, how did they translate into your career field? I know we have a couple kids here who are like, well, I want to study this, but I have no idea how it would apply to something I choose. And I'm trying to let them know that communication skills are used in every career, especially yours. You have a communication career.
Right, exactly. But I mean, some of it too, I think a lot of, where you really make the money in radio, if you really want to know that, this is what you guys are all thinking. I can see that in the back of your heads. Where does this translate money-wise? Traffic directors, news directors, on-air people are not the top of the list. I'll tell you that right now. I make just fine money, but it's not top of the list. If you want to make money in radio, and that applies to a lot of other places, is sales. And without communication skills, you don't sell. And I don't care if you're selling toilet paper or if you're selling radio advertisements. You have to be able to communicate verbally, written. In this brave new 21st century world, there's so much more communication via phone, text, email, that type of thing, which is great. But you better be able to come off the way you want to be, to come off to your clients. You want to come off as articulate and, yeah, I want you to spend money with me. Well, tell me why I want to spend money with you. You need to be somebody I can trust, I guess, with my cash. I mean, everybody's hard-earned cash. And you guys in a similar size community and a rural community know, too, that people work hard for their money, really hard in some cases. And that money doesn't leave their hands without some kind of legit, in the Midwest, people don't throw money away like maybe our East and West Coast friends do. So the stuff I did in high school, I was your speech nerd and a school teacher's kid who got paid to find mistakes in the newspaper and some of that kind of stuff. But I also had teachers that were very much like your teacher, encouraging you to, and it is valid. I know it may seem kind of obnoxious sometimes, but it's being well-read and being able to communicate both verbally and in the written word is a skill that is really lacking in a lot of people.
Did you find questions you wanted addressed? When they're not being videoed, they actually do talk.
You guys are shy about the videotape? That's funny.
They're scared of it. You have a perspective, you and I both have a perspective of being farmers' daughters and having brothers in agriculture. And raise your hand if you have a parent or grandparent involved in ag. Yep, there we go. So how have you seen effective communication with the ag industry? Because you sell ads for that, you represent them, but we also have the family experience with your dad, with your grandpa,
right,
the horses, and even with Ben.
Yeah. And I mean, Ben still has us doing this stuff. Elizabeth shows cattle. And so we have our own little herd of, and the ag industry, if you really want me to get going on something, I can get on a soapbox and talk for a long time. People are so uneducated about their food and where it comes from, and people are so scared. And so you see pop culture and the TV, if you ever watch it, and the radio, even in some cases, hyping up the GMOs and all these things. It's kind of scare tactics. But it's a lot of times people are scared of it because they don't have the foggiest notion where that hamburger came from or where your gallon of milk really, really came from. And so from a farming perspective, if you're sitting in there in the classroom, like maybe our brothers may have, Robin, and said, okay, well, I'm just going to be a farmer. I don't need to know how to effectively communicate. Well, if
I think
my brother, for example,
both of our beds.
Yeah, I think
we both have
exactly. But I mean, they both now farm also. And like my brother, for example, sells cattle to people. We hope club cattle that show really well for people, or breeding stock or whatever. Well, if you aren't able to communicate with the person that you want them to spend a large chunk of money on an animal that you raise and say it's going to be a great animal, you have to be able to convince them of that. And in order to do that, you have to be able to communicate. That's just all there is to it. And yeah, you have to be knowledgeable in your field, the ag field or whatever field that is. But then there's the basics, things like I mentioned before, just putting a sentence together. It's an important and lost skill.
Evan.
Yeah.
Get where you need to be. One of the questions the kids had asked was what communication looks like. We know you do radio stuff. You told us about inputting. As a radio person, are you also responsible for putting stuff online? Or are you responsible for social media? And how does communication look differently there?
Yeah, and that's been a big change. I mean, even just since I started, and of course my boss is older than I am, has been in radio for a very, very long time. And so it's gone from, very, very different things. But yeah, so I'm in charge of, or I administrate 3 of our Facebook pages, and that's obviously kind of a team effort. And I mean, you guys know social media, it's simple. This is why I love it. It's a great and easy way to get your message out to a lot of people in a short period of time. And it doesn't have to cost you anything necessarily except your time. And really, I don't know, time is pretty negligible with computers. I think it takes such a short period. But there too, you have to be very careful. If you're just going to go out, and people find this trouble with social media all the time, if you are being misunderstood because the sentence that you put up with that story didn't match it, or that kind of thing, it can mislead people and make people feel like you're saying something that you're maybe not, or believe something that you maybe don't. And you see this all the time. Like if you guys are Facebook people, actually you're young, right? So I have a 15-year-old at home. So I know Facebook is for old people. So you're probably Instagram. What's that other one with anyway, it doesn't matter. But you see headlines, news headlines are so misleading. And I mean, that's been the case since print, newspaper print. This is how newspaper print guys sold newspapers. Well, this is how they bait and click, right? So you give them a sensational headline, then you get into the news story, and if you actually read it, it's nothing to match. Well, that's misleading, and I don't feel like, this is another part of how we were raised, that you should be misleading or misrepresenting yourself, especially online.
And the online stuff never goes away. Like you can delete it from your account, but it's out
Right.
there for the end of time.
Yes, kids, don't ever forget that. If it's online, anyone can see it. I preach this a lot at home, but it's the truth. And this is another thing too, as you know, administrating the page and that type of thing. Also, my personal page, they all know I'm a representative of the company. So what I put on my personal page, I'm already going to be paying attention to, just because that's something I hold myself to that standard anyway. But also because I administrate the work pages and am a representative of the job, you have to pay attention to that too.
And that brings up an interesting issue where this is a discussion among teachers to have with their students. And some states like South Dakota is starting this in junior high with their kids. That anything you put online, you are representing yourself, you are branding yourself. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we encourage kids to have a professional account that they'll use for their schools and to use for contact with news sources, their colleges that they're interested in. But then you have your personal stuff. And if you want to keep your personal stuff private, well, first of all, check your settings on there, but also be aware that personal stuff doesn't always stay personal. I spoke with a student this summer who had just gotten into the big business college in Michigan. Okay, I forgot the name. And they had searched through his Facebook post and saw a post that he made when he was 14, and they asked him about it in the entrance interview. So when Janelle's talking about, you go by Janelle or Nell now? I never know.
Oh, yeah, I've answered anything.
Yeah, but what she's talking about is that personal branding, that she has her professional stuff, but everyone like me who sees her on her personal Facebook page, well, we know who she represents, and we're aware of the character she's representing, whether she's being incredibly intentional about it or not. So that's my 10 cents on that. Maybe.
Yeah, I think, no, and I think that's something that it can be way more than 10 cents. It should be $10 worth, because I spend a fair amount of time on Facebook, partly because I find it interesting, but in part because it's a great study on what bleh out to the entire world without really. Did you really want everyone on your entire list to see that? Really? This is what you wanted on the internet?
Yeah. Questions?
Evidence of it is interesting.
Yeah. Well, they have their questions in front of them now. That's
Yay, and I have them in front of me too.
Any of those look interesting to you that you want to address?
What was my first job and how did it lead to your current career? This is an interesting thing. My boss and I were talking about this morning.
Everything. Like,
what's that?
You did everything. We used to call you the hardest working unemployed person we knew, because you did everything.
What? Ah, that's hilarious. Really?
That's what my resume used to call you.
That's funny. They probably still laugh because I'm involved in a lot of really goofy side stuff. Not goofy. I think it's interesting. It's interesting to me. But this is the other thing. If you're going to learn anything, learn how to manage your time, because it took me well into adulthood to figure out how to manage my time so that I could be a busy person and do the stuff I'm passionate about without neglecting my family and my housework and my job and, you know, those other important things. But, yeah, that's really funny. I guess I've always kind of been the one involved in a lot of stuff. I'm on the Pioneer Cemetery Commission here in Wennes County. I'm a commissioner, and so we go spend our weekends straightening gravestones and fixing in cemeteries. And I don't know, what else do I do? I'm president of our church council. So we have a big weekend this weekend in Steven with a local town celebration. I announced both of our parades for that. I'm the president of the Spring Grove High School Music Boosters. So lots of teenagers get to be annoyed by me on a relatively regular basis. We've got marching band season starts tomorrow. So yeah, it's those kind of side things. Don't hesitate to get involved in your community, though. I feel very strongly about that part of the reason I am who I am and part of the reason Robin is who she is because we had, I think anyway, is a small but strong community, starting with our families, obviously, but then extending out to your church, your school, your community.
Yeah.
And when things go wrong, those people are there for you.
So what was that first job?
Oh, my first paying job? I started the day after I graduated from high school, and I worked at Dunroman. It's a little campground just outside, not far from your house, actually, where you grew up. And I worked there for 4 years right out of high school. I did like little side stuff when I was in college, but I was an RA when I was in college. That was super fun. Do that if you can, if you go to college. That's really a fun job. Let's see. And then I was a nurse's aide for a long time, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And that's kind of how I ended up here in the first place, because one of my coworkers went to my current coworker for massage therapy and saying, I need somebody who could do this and this. My coworker at the time says, oh, I know this girl. I'll have her fax. You guys even know what a fax machine is? Fax you her resume. And that's what I did. And I got hired, and the rest is history. But I don't know, some of the goofy stuff I didn't get paid for, Robin. I don't remember all the 4-H stuff. And I mean, if you can do that stuff, do it. 4-H, FFA, it was all great. Speech, bands, choir. I was that nerd.
One of the topics you just brought up is networking. And I think this is something you and I did naturally as high schoolers in our particular community. And some of these kids do it very well, especially those in FFA and 4-H here. We have a very strong FFA program. we have about 3 minutes of class left. Do you have any last words on networking for them?
Oh yeah. And I love it. Networking is such a buzz thing, but it makes me laugh that I'm sitting here doing this with you, someone who I met very long time ago. And, don't ever burn bridges. This is what I'm going to tell you about networking. Say you get yourself a little side job just to whatever you're going to do. I mean, I worked overnights at a plant one summer because I wanted very badly to get a new car because my other car was junk. And when I quit that job, because you just, you never really know. And those are people that I still see to this day, that it's not necessarily that they're helping me or I'm helping them, but it never hurts to say, oh, I can help you because I know that person. Let me give them a call and see if they do you a favor. Or, do you know what I mean? It's social media, except better because it's real human beings.
Which is important.
Exactly.
I'm going to let you guys start packing up your stuff. You can be exiting the Google Hangout. I'll keep Janelle on the screen because why not? I haven't talked to her in ages.
This was really fun.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't bore them to death.
Oh, well, they're teenagers and it's after lunch. If you can keep any of them awake, you're amazing,
That's a tough spot to be in right there.
It is. Give me a second. I'm going to stop the actual recording.